has a fleet it cannot defend, carrying oil it cannot afford to lose, through waters it no longer controls. And Ukraine figured this out before the world did. The Shadow Fleet. Roughly 600 aging tankers operating outside Western insurance, outside Western tracking, outside Western law. Putin built this parallel system after 2022 sanctions cut Russia's mainstream oil export network. He needed a way to keep crude flowing to India, China, and Turkey. He needed revenue. He needed the war to keep running. And for a while, it worked. But now those ships are burning, not metaphorically, literally. Struck in port, struck at anchor, struck mid-route. And every hull that goes dark takes with it a slice of the budget feeding the front. Russia spends approximately $300 million per day on its Ukraine war. Soldiers, ammunition, missiles, logistics, occupation administration. $300 million every single day. That money has to come from somewhere, and the somewhere is overwhelmingly oil. Hydrocarbons account for roughly 30% of Russia's federal budget. In wartime, with sanctions strangling other revenue streams, that dependency deepens. Shadow Fleet was the mechanism keeping that revenue alive. Putin didn't build it as a luxury. He built it as a lifeline. Strangle the fleet, strangle the budget. Ukraine understood this equation early, and now it is executing against it with systematic precision. But first, you need to understand what the Shadow Fleet actually is, because most coverage treats it as an abstraction. It isn't. These are real ships. Many of them are 20, 25, 30 years old, purchased through shell companies registered in Dubai, Hong Kong, Gabon, insured by obscure firms in non-Western jurisdictions, crewed by sailors from India, the Philippines, Myanmar, who often don't know or don't ask who ultimately owns the cargo. They sail under flags of convenience: Palau, Cameroon, Gabon. Flags chosen specifically because their registries don't coordinate with Western enforcement. The G7 price cap of $60 per barrel was designed to slow this system. It didn't stop it. Russia simply moved around it, using non-G7 intermediaries, falsifying cargo documents, turning off AIS transponders in sensitive waters. At peak operation in 2023 and early 2024, the Shadow Fleet was moving an estimated 2 million barrels of Russian crude per day. The revenue from that flow, even at discounted prices, was sustaining the war machine. That was the system Ukraine decided to destroy. The campaign didn't start with explosions. It started with intelligence. Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, the GUR, spent months mapping the fleet. Ship names, registration chains, port schedules, crew rotations, ownership structures buried under layers of shell companies. The SBU, Ukraine's security service, ran parallel financial mapping, tracing payment flows from Russian oil sales through intermediary banks back to defense procurement budgets. What they built was not just a target list. It was a financial kill chain. Identify the ship, identify the port. Identify the moment it is most vulnerable. Strike, and then do it again. The first major confirmed strike came in late 2024. A Shadow Fleet tanker hit at anchor in a Baltic port. The method was a naval drone, a maritime USV, the same class of unmanned surface vehicle Ukraine had already used to devastate Russia's Black Sea fleet. Small, fast, difficult to detect on radar, carrying enough explosive to rupture a hull or ignite a cargo hold. Cost a fraction of the ship it destroys. The ratio is the point. A $400,000 drone hitting a $40 million tanker carrying cargo worth tens of millions more. This is asymmetric warfare applied to economic infrastructure, and Ukraine kept going. By early 2025, the campaign had expanded geographically. Baltic approaches, the Black Sea corridor, the Turkish Straits, where Shadow Fleet tankers queue for passage and become briefly predictable, briefly trackable, briefly vulnerable. The Kerch Strait, the narrow choke point connecting the Black Sea to the Sea of Azov, already under pressure from Ukraine's ongoing campaign against Russian naval assets. And critically, the Baltic ports we discussed in a previous video. Primorsk and Luga, the two terminals that together export roughly 2 million barrels of crude per day. Both located in the Leningrad region, whose air defenses were stripped to feed the Ukraine front. Both now within reach of Ukrainian long-range drones. In March 2026, Luga was struck 5 times in 10 days. Transneft Baltica storage tanks hit directly. The same night, Primorsk was also struck. NASA satellite data confirmed simultaneous fires at both facilities. In April, Luga again. The crude oil loading terminal damaged. In May, a Karakurt-class missile ship, a patrol boat, and a Shadow Fleet tanker were all hit at Primorsk in a single operation. Zelensky announced the results himself. He does that now, deliberately, publicly, because the announcement is part of the weapon. Think about what that announcement does. Every shipping company operating in Baltic waters reads it. Every insurance underwriter reads it. Every captain considering a port call at Primorsk reads it. The message is not subtle. These ports are under active attack and will continue to be. That message does something no missile can do. It raises the cost of doing business with Russia without firing another shot. Port insurance premiums spike. Shipping companies demand higher fees to compensate for risk. Some refuse routes entirely, the ones who don't charge more. And Russia, already selling oil at a discount to circumvent the price cap, now faces higher transportation costs eating further into that discounted margin. The financial squeeze compounds at every layer, and Zelensky's stated intent goes further than disruption. Ukraine wants to destroy these ports beyond repair. The Feodosia terminal in Crimea is the precedent. After sustained Ukrainian strikes, ISW assessed Russia will never fully restore it. That assessment changed the calculus for Russian planners. A damaged port can be repaired. A destroyed port requires years and billions to rebuild. Strike it again before repairs are complete, and the reconstruction timeline extends indefinitely. Ukraine is attempting to apply that doctrine to Primorsk and Luga simultaneously. This is not a nuisance campaign. It is an attempt at permanent infrastructure denial. But the ports are only one dimension. The ships themselves are the second. Here is something the coverage misses. The Shadow Fleet has no replacement pipeline. When a mainstream Western-insured tanker is damaged, there is an entire industrial ecosystem to draw on. Insurance claims, repair yards, replacement vessels from a deep market. The Shadow Fleet operates outside that ecosystem by design, which means when a Shadow Fleet vessel is damaged or destroyed, replacing it is genuinely difficult. The pool of ships willing to operate under these conditions, outside Western insurance, under flag of convenience registries, is finite. It was already shrinking before Ukraine started striking. Western sanctions enforcement has been tightening. The U.S. Treasury and EU have been progressively blacklisting vessels and operators. Insurance markets have been quietly withdrawing. Even some non-Western intermediaries have pulled back as the legal and reputational risks mounted. Ukraine's kinetic campaign is accelerating a process that was already underway. Every hull destroyed narrows the pool further, and a narrower pool means higher fees for the hulls that remain, which means higher transportation costs, which means lower net revenue per barrel for Russia. The math is relentless. Now look at what this does to the front. Russia's defense budget for 2026 was constructed on oil price assumptions that are no longer holding. The original budget assumed Urals crude, Russia's primary export blend, trading around $65 to $70 per barrel. By early 2026, Urals was trading significantly below that, pushed down by the price cap, by OPEC production decisions, by global demand softness, and by the growing risk premium that Shadow Fleet disruption was adding to every Russian cargo. The budget gap is real. And a government running a wartime deficit with limited borrowing capacity and shrinking export revenue faces a brutal set of choices. Cut social spending and risk domestic unrest. Cut military procurement and risk front collapse. Or try to borrow, but from whom, on what terms, at what cost. There are no good options, only less bad ones. And Ukraine is deliberately forcing Russia toward all of them simultaneously. Has evolved as a military force. This is not the Ukraine of 2022, improvising defenses with whatever weapons arrived from Western donors. This is a sophisticated intelligence and strike operation targeting an adversary's economic architecture. The targeting process alone represents a significant institutional capability. Tracking shell company ownership chains, mapping port logistics schedules, coordinating drone strikes with signals intelligence to hit vessels at moments of maximum vulnerability, timing public announcements for psychological effect. This is the kind of operational integration that takes years to build. Ukraine built it under fire, and the operation has an international dimension that makes it more durable. Because Ukraine is not acting alone. Baltic states have been sharing maritime intelligence. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania have all publicly committed to tightening Shadow Fleet monitoring in their territorial waters and exclusive economic zones. Finland has increased Coast Guard patrols and intelligence sharing. Denmark, controlling the straits through which much Baltic shipping must pass, has been under pressure to inspect suspicious vessels. The UK, which played a leading role in building the Shadow Fleet sanctions framework, continues to blacklist operators. The net is tightening from multiple directions simultaneously. Ukraine provides the kinetic pressure. Allies provide the intelligence, legal, and enforcement architecture around it. Together, they are making the Shadow Fleet's operating environment progressively more hostile. But there is a harder truth that needs to be stated clearly. The Shadow Fleet has not been destroyed. It has been degraded. There is a significant difference. Russia is still exporting oil. Revenues have fallen but not collapsed. India continues to buy Russian crude at steep discounts, absorbing roughly 40% of Russia's seaborne exports. China continues, though at lower volumes than 2022, Turkey remains a transit and purchase point. The financial pressure is real and accumulating, but it has not yet reached the threshold of crisis. Putin has demonstrated a tolerance for economic pain that Western analysts consistently underestimate. The Russian state can absorb significant revenue shortfalls by drawing down reserves, cutting non-military expenditure, and accepting declining living standards for its population. None of that is sustainable indefinitely. But indefinitely is a long time, and wars are fought in the present tense.